Hi friends, and welcome to Virtual Meridian. We are so excited to have you here joining us this week. My name is Lisa Nestor, and I'm a senior strategist at the Stellar Development Foundation, where I work with our enterprise ecosystem. I've been part of this growing community for quite some time now, and it is so exciting to have us all gathering again with some familiar faces and many new ones for another year of Meridian. But I will not be joined here alone this week. Our head of ecosystem, Justin Rice, will be my co-host this week at Meridian. He is a self-proclaimed blockchain expert and also an accomplished musician, writer, and filmmaker. Justin, are you there?
I am here and I am ready, Lisa. I'm ready to listen, I'm ready to engage, and I'm ready to create global connections to solve real-world challenges. And that's a good thing because that's literally the theme of this year's Meridian, right? Creating global connections to solve real-world challenges. 2020 has been a crazy year, and it's really laid bare a lot of the challenges the world faces. Now, these challenges aren't necessarily new, but we are seeing them in a different light, and it feels like a good time to step back and to think big and to work together to start to tackle them. So we're so excited to have you all here to do just that.
Yes, having you all here being the key phrase there. You, our amazing stellar community, is what makes this work so inspiring to me. A global group of leaders looking to reimagine our financial system and make it more equitable and accessible. You are truly inspiring. But this week, we're in treat for a little bit more inspiration. We've got some very special guests who will be joining us as part of our community.
That's right, Lisa. We're going to kick off each day with a thought leader exploring a key theme. Today, we have Sir Tim Berners Lee talking about innovation. Tomorrow, we'll look at inclusion with former President of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Wednesday, we'll look at the role of our governing institutions with former President of the World Bank, Jim Kim. And Thursday, we'll hear from one of the most impressive network builders of all time, co-founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman.
And that is just the start, Justin. So here's how this is going to work, folks. Each day, we're going to have 2 tracks running. We'll have the business track that I'll be leading, where we'll dive into things like use cases, the stellar business ecosystem, and policy and regulation. Then Justin's going to lead our technical track. This is for people who want to get more into the weeds on how things are built on Stellar and the various tools and software we have available in the ecosystem. And then we know it's hard to create the fun and networking of an in-person event, but boy, are we going to try.
Yes, Lisa, we will indeed try. So throughout the week, there are virtual lounges where you can chat with fellow Meridian attendees. We also have some fun planned every day, starting today with a mixology happy hour. You can learn to make some cocktails, and of course, you can drink said cocktails. Now, for our drier crowd, we also have wellness activities like yoga, and for the gamers out there, we're hosting a game night on Twitch. I'm also unbelievably excited to share that we have a Meridian house band, and it's The Roots. No joke, The Roots will be playing throughout the week, and we'll have a concert to wrap up the conference on Thursday.
It's so exciting. I can't believe the Roots are going to be playing here. Also, Friday, we're going to be devoting the entire day to interactive sessions. This is your opportunity to engage with the rest of the Stellar community, as well as team members from the SDF. You can sign up for these interactive sessions within your dashboard, and make sure to do it early because some of these sessions may go fast. And did I mention that throughout the week, you can win some Stellar swag? During the breaks, we'll have various quizzes to test your Stellar trivia. Answer correctly, and you can win prizes, and we'll announce the winners at the end of each day. So Justin, let me ask you, are you ready to get this party started?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. Today's big idea, innovation. And we're going to kick off the conference with one of the most important and inspiring innovators of our era. In fact, it's thanks to this first Meridian speaker that, despite the pandemic, we're all able to connect today on this virtual platform. In 1989, he invented the World Wide Web, weaving together 3 fundamental technologies that remain the foundation of today's virtual world: HTML, URL, and HTTP. Since then, he's been busy advocating for a free, open, accessible web. He founded the World Wide Web Consortium, a global standards organization that helps the web realize its potential. He founded the World Wide Web Foundation, which seeks to ensure the web serves humanity by establishing it as a global public good and a basic right. And he co-founded the Open Data Institute, which seeks to show the value of open data and advocate for the innovative use of open data to effect positive change across the globe. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce this incredible pioneer, Sir Tim Berners Lee. Welcome to Meridian.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. And it's great to be here. An honor to kick it off. These are it's a strange time. We're learning to do things in a different way. It's strange that we have to meet because we can't travel. But I have to say that one of the things that we have noticed is that for a lot of people, the fact that they have had to be connected by the internet and they've done all their work on the web has meant that they've realized that actually it becomes a lifeline rather than just no longer the fun toy or the nice to have. So these are different. These are strange times. Would I have ever imagined that we'd have had the pandemic? Would I have ever imagined 30 years ago, when I invented the web, that we would be in this situation with the web either? I'll take you back a bit. I invented the web in 1989 at CERN in Geneva. The internet, remember, the web and the internet are different. The internet had been invented 20 years before. The internet itself was already an open, permissionless space. It was a platform that didn't have an attitude as to what you should do with it. So that's how I was able to build the web on top of the internet. At CERN, there were people coming from all over the world to share their research and build things together. But each of them came with their own computer systems as well. Despite the fact there was a lot of collaboration in person, their computer systems were not helping this. So I was frustrated by this lack of interoperability between all these different types of computer. And in particular, the types of documentation system that were running on these computers. I imagined fixing it by building a sort of meta documentation system, if you like, which would virtually contain all the others. It had to do that, it had to be powerful enough to map all of their existing user interfaces into one meta human interface language, if you like. So hypertext was that. Hypertext was the general unconstrained world of links, which Ted Nelson had invented the word for, at least. And so hypertext was the user interface model. The internet was there to connect the back ends. I proposed this idea. I wrote a memo to my boss, Mike Sandel. And in fact, fortunately, and very lucky for the web, he allowed me to do it as an unofficial project in between two official projects. So that's, when it comes to innovation, sometimes somebody allowing you the time to do that, whether it's the 20% time or in my case, the 120% time, then that can be really crucial. So what I wanted to build was a system for collaboration, for creativity, learning and connecting. I felt it had to be a read-write system, so anybody could contribute to it. I wanted it to be constantly updated. I realized if it was going to be up to date compared to a lot of systems up there, it had to be instantly easy to be updated by anybody. So if you saw something was wrong, you could fix it. So I knew it had to be open. It had to be a universal system to include all those other systems. It had to be independent of language, of type of document, of structure of document, of culture and ability or disability of the user. Very important to me was the idea of connecting people anywhere in the world and the sharing of ideas. I had a thought that on one side of the world, there could be somebody with 50% of the solution to a problem. On the other side of the world would be somebody with the other 50%. And I wanted the web to be a place where those two people could connect and build the complete solution together in the hypertext. Fortunately, my team were already connected by the internet, right? 20 years on, we had email, we had network news, if anybody remembers that. We had file transfer protocol sites. So those internet tools, much cruder than the web, but in a way, a useful way to bootstrap ourselves into being an online team. When it was released, the web grew exponentially. And in fact, after a decade or so, it looked like it was promising mostly good things. The blogosphere looked positive, lots of Wikipedia, and so on. So I think a lot of people felt that it was going to be net good. But the web, as I'd hoped originally, isn't the web that we're seeing today. There are a lot of issues, and there are issues of centralization into social networking silos. There are issues of misinformation. There are issues of data ownership. There's issues of manipulation through fake news and conspiracy theories. So there are lots, they're now getting quite well documented. But it's always concerned me that the web should serve humanity well. So yes, as you mentioned, I started the Web Consortium in 1994 to coordinate the standards, the Web Foundation to advance the web generally as a public good and as a right, and the Open Data Institute to look at open data and advocate more for it. But what I want to talk to you right now is my work with Solid. So Solid is a new way to connect people and data. It's if you like, some people call it the Web Take 3. It's protocol, it's open source code. It's open source web-based protocol that re-architects the way data is stored and shared, and as a result, how apps are developed. Solid uses existing web standards like HTTP, WebSockets, and linked data. A Solid spec is, if you like, a universal API between servers, between apps and stores. So this allows any shape of data to be written into a store. And then the store is controlled by the user. Any app they allow access to their store can then read or write as appropriate data from the store. We call these stores personal online data stores because that's like pods. So your Solid pod. Think of a Solid pod like it's a place for storing data. It's a bit like a USB key in the sky, if you like. A user can store all their data on their pod or several pods. You may have pods for work, pods with different that you use for different things, but they're all compatible. And to the apps, they all look the same. They all talk the Solid spec. The pods are responsible for access control. So the pod implements your wishes about who gets access to what. You can share any of the data in your pod with anyone you choose or with no one at all. So the way Solid works clearly is total opposite to the way apps work, the way they're built today, where you hand your data over to some company where you want some service, you go to some web app and it stores your data in the silo and it's locked inside that app forever. Currently, the utility you get from your own data is limited, but the organization, the data, the sort of value that social networking silo gets from your data is much greater. What's wrong with this picture? That's not fair. It's not useful. Solid flips this current dysfunctional world of data silos upside down, puts the user on the top. In fact, you could say it flips the web right side up. It puts users back in control in a way that, used to be when everybody felt they could have their own website and their own blog. The same sense of sovereign identity, of a contributor amongst peers, sense of agency as an individual. The Solid world is incredibly empowering, not just for everyday people who want more agency over their personal data, but also for developers and also for organizations which store other people's personal data. Once everyone has a Solid pod, life for developers is great. We can tap into a rich tapestry of permissioned data to fuel our creativity and solve problems. Solid allows developers to focus on the functionality of the app without having to create a specific backend for each app. All right, the Solid pod of all the people out there who are going to use your app, that provides a generic backend store which works with your apps without modification. No changes to the backend, you write your app. And the Solid culture also includes beneficent apps which do right by users. Beneficent apps work for the user. And they're much more fun to write. In the Solid ecosystem, there are lots of different business models that are emerging. And for example, different ways in which you can fund solid pods and different ways in which you can fund people writing apps, different ways in which people will pay for services and so on. So the world is turning into a much richer one, which in which we don't assume that the only way you can make money in a startup is from clickbait. Massive improve. In order to fuel the uptake of Solid, I co-founded Inrupt, the company. Inrupt has been providing resources to make Solid a reality. I'm hugely excited to be working with Inrupt because we can provide a commercial force as additional accountability for Solid systems for those who want the commercial version. Of course, there's a huge and complete Solid open source stack. Last week, Inrupt released an enterprise Solid server on general availability, and we're working with some large companies looking at deploying Solid initially at scale, including the National Health Service in the UK, the BBC, the Flanders government, looking at everybody at giving everybody in Flanders, that part of Belgium, a pod, and also talked to NatWest Bank, for example. So a very exciting place with Solid. Very happy to talk to you more about it. Both Solid and Stellar are systems where open source software is critical. As with the web 30 years ago, even though open source wasn't the term then, there are these three things: the original web, Solid, and Stellar, all platforms. All platforms did you want anybody to be able to play with by firing up an open source implementation and having at it. At Stellar, your work with open source software for financial services has been really important. The open source world has changed enormously, certainly over the last 30 years. Instead of coding out functions from scratch, nowadays we just search for an existing solution. We suck in huge amounts of supporting code as we satisfy the dependencies of the things we decided to use. Now, of course, there are lots of issues with this. The basic rule that a function is only written once, and otherwise you just search for it, is very powerful. It's a different open source world, if you like. I hope also that in the future, Solid apps will start also to take on the functions of those centralized open source repositories. In fact, that opening that up, the open source development tool set, if you like, Solid will produce a new wave of innovation in those tools themselves. The motivation of these systems, of course, is not building systems for the sake of systems. When I think about the future, I want us to build apps that promote science and democracy and trust and inclusion. Software and organizations that promote inclusion, like Stellar for inclusive financial systems and Solid for inclusive social and collaborative systems, I think are hugely important. I want to see software that works for the user. I want to see beneficent apps. I feel that the open source world is full of people already building beneficent apps, because that's the way open source works. Even though people raise their eyebrows about where's the revenue going to come from when you talk about beneficent apps. But the whole world of open source and the things we're building, like Stellar and Solid, makes me altogether really, really excited about the future. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Fantastic, thanks for that. We are definitely getting a lot of questions coming in, and I just want to tell everyone at Meridian, you can submit questions for Sir Tim via the QA bar on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll take as many as possible before the end of the session. And I want to start out, there's actually a bunch of questions that have already come in, and a lot of them have a similar theme. So I'm kind of going to bundle them together. And it's, what similarities do you see between the early phases of the World Wide Web and the state of blockchain now? And a related question, basically, blockchain is a great technology, but it's underutilized. What do you think needs to happen to spark the network effect that made the World Wide Web what it is today? Those are from Wouter and Dan and Stefan.
That's interesting because blockchain and Solid they're both sort of decentralization, but in a way they're quite different systems. So the way they take off is different. Blockchain is a software where everybody runs the software, and you have servers all over the place, and it's decentralized, and everybody stores exactly the same copy of the blockchain. With Solid, it's completely different. Everybody runs can run their own Solid pod, but they will put completely different things on it. And with a Solid pod, you can put a huge amount of effort into your Solid pod or not. You can pay somebody huge amounts of money to make a very secure and robust Solid pod or not, and so on. Whereas with blockchain, in a way, the quality of services is the same because everybody's relying on the same network of people to support it. So in a way, they're very different. So it's hard to pick up. It's hard to try to reasons for picking up blockchain systems and reasons for picking up web-based systems may not convert from one to the other. What it's always good to connect systems together. So one of the things we've always said that the Solid needs we have a good single sign-in system for the whole web. And at the moment that is OIDC based. And so, and we've got a hook waiting there. So one of the things we could do is we can connect them. We could use blockchain-based login for Solid would be great. If I can log into my Solid web ID with blockchain, then they will take off together.
A related question, this one's from David. Has Solid or Inrupt considered leveraging Stellar as a platform for decentralized monetization for a payment layer?
We've been, just recently, there has been a lot of interest in, I say, an increasing interest in payment in general. And so I think that, for example, somebody with a Solid-based payment system, which involved people just putting digitally signed things on your Solid pod, you can do that to a certain extent. You can digitally sign an IOU and put it in your Solid pod, and so on. So then you can connect, and so you can build sorts of. I think another connection is that as the Solid world is interested in being a great variety of payment systems, and just as people, I think there's a backlash coming that people they don't want fake news, they want to pay. Micropayment like Satoshi Pay, for example, I think is really interesting. We've never micropayment has been promised for years. Every 5 years, we say let's do micropayments. It doesn't happen, but now, if you can pay for both content, people now realize after the fake news debacle that they want to be able to pay a journalist to work for them, and why not pay a musician to make music, and why not pay an app developer to be able to develop a beneficent app for you? So adding micropayment, you're making the payment services in general smoother and easier, obviously makes all that better.
Great. This one's from Lee. What is the big blocker for adoption of Solid?
Well, I'm not sure that there is one particular big blocker that, in a way. So I'd say there's two. We've got two models of the way it takes off. One is that one of these, we're talking to all these large companies. So we talk to a bank. Bank gives everybody a Solid pods. people start using it for doing their taxes. After a while, people realize that, the sort of the tax software, people realize that they can, it's really good tax. There's some, it starts itself, the products start being deployed like by the Flanders government widely, so they're usually available. And then just within Flanders, you get Solid then taking off. First, just doing stuff with the Flanders government, then bit by bit, people start using all kinds of apps, and then Flanders starts humming, and then people just go out and get Solid pods because they need it. And, and then it takes off like that. So it could take off virally, but within a particular space. Another possibility is that it's hanging around in various places, but one particular community, maybe journalists develop apps for tracking their stats, keep having interviews very, very securely and keeping their sources secret. Maybe people start sharing fitness data or something like that. Something that's one particular thing, and it takes off in a vertical. And so then it runs, and so it then spreads virally, but just through people interested in one particular thing. And then all the other apps start connecting on. So it's when you try to predict which app is going to be the app which people take a fancy to, well, it's a bit like, I think you can't do that, because when you look at the silly dances on YouTube, the silly, like the people that go viral, you can't predict those. So you can't predict what the general public out there are going to take a fancy to. But you do have to be ready so that when they do, the systems will scale.
Fantastic. This one's from Frank, and I think it's generally about advice, right? So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self regarding development of the initial World Wide Web protocols? And I think we can even extrapolate that to say, as an ecosystem of people that are working to develop the Stellar protocol, what advice would you give us?
Well, for me, the web was a completely decentralized system where everybody generates the name for their document, apart from the fact that I said that the name would start off with a domain name. What's wrong with this picture? So in fact, the domain name system is in fact a centralized system, and it has a root. And as a result of me picking the domain name system, if you want a Solid pod, you have to get a domain name, you have to get a domain name, you have to go through a centralized system, where you may end up, somebody may have already bought the domain name you wanted, and just out of spite, or just out of just as and they may want to charge you an arm and a leg for it. So the domain name system has been a disappointment. I hope that it will be run as a public benefit, as a public institution. It hasn't. It's just been read as a bunch of very much as a trade organization of all the people who make lots of money out of domain names. So, okay, so I suppose if it's what the rule is, look out for any form of centralization. And even also, so in a blockchain, if there's only one blockchain, is that in fact a form of centralization? Well, if not, the Bitcoin blockchain isn't the one you're using, but they thought it would be. So, but it became in a way centralized. That was the main blockchain, and people found actually they didn't want to use the blockchain. So I don't know. Beware of DNS. Certainly, let's rebuild bits of DNS. Let's make it a top level domain which doesn't use DNS, as it were.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like there's a trade-off between centralization is often easier on consumers, but ultimately worse for society as a whole. And how do you sort of deal with that fact? How do you make it so that a decentralized system is actually consumer friendly?
There's lots of ways, in fact, in which you need centralization. So, for example, when you use Solid, it's really useful to have a list of all the Solid apps and a list of all the Solid pod servers, and a list of all the open source software. And it's useful to have central GitHub repositories of all the code and stuff. But really, but in a way they are a crutch, which we're using until we're flying and do everything in a way. hopefully we will, when we do our project management, we will be using decentralized project management tools on top of Solid in future. So what was the question again?
I guess my question was, how do you do that in a way that makes it user friendly so that in order to spur adoption, so that from a user point of view, it's just as easy to use, say, a Solid app as it is to use a Web 2.0 app?
Well, I suppose one of the challenges we find is we're trying to do everything in the browser. And so you have to put everything through the browser, and the browser is your interface. So for example, key management. So if you want to do something secure, if your name is if you're going to join the system, whatever, blockchain or Solid, and what you do is your computer, your phone mints a key pair. You create a cryptographic sovereign identity, and you keep the private key with you on your phone, and then the public key you publish. And then when you do that, managing that private key, backing it up, sharing it between all, so doing that easily is a challenge. But if you do that, if you could do that so that somebody can call themselves whatever they like, but the system actually knows them by a 4 kilobit key, then that is the art. Certainly doing cryptographically strong things, but in a way that very simple, but that doesn't involve user steps which are different from sending an Instagram photo. That is the art, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, key management is something that we at SDF and that the Stellar ecosystem as a whole has been thinking about a lot. And it's definitely something that we're going to be bringing up a lot over the course of the next few days. I think that's all the time that we have right now for questions, but thanks everybody for submitting them. Again, you can do that throughout Meridian. You could submit questions via the QA bar, and we will definitely try to get to all of them. There were tons for Sir Tim. I really appreciate everyone's engagement, and Sir Tim, I really appreciate the time you took to talk with us today. It's definitely an honor to have you. Thank you so much.
The honor is mine. Thanks for letting me join you, the Stellar crowd.
Yeah, of course. And I'm sure everyone is going to leave this talk and go just, if they haven't already, dig into Solid. It's pretty amazing that it is so developer focused.
Yeah, solidproject.org.
Solidproject.org. Perfect.
Not.com. Yeah.
Not.com. Yeah. Same as Stellar, stellar.org.
Right.
Thank you so much. All right, Meridian, I love that. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you'd like to share your thoughts, there's also a session feedback bar at the top right of your screen. It's simple to access. It's easy to fill out. We'd definitely love to hear from you. The more input that we get on these sessions, the better we can do. I also urge you to take a few minutes at some point during the conference to check out the next generation of innovators. So before Meridian, we hosted a hackathon that challenged old hands and newcomers alike to build something demonstrating one of the new features that was added to the Stellar protocol in 2020. And now it's your chance to decide on the winner. So on your Meridian dashboard, head to the hackathon tab where you can check out the finalists and vote for your favorite. Is the next Sir Tim Berners Lee among them? Possibly. So we're about to head into our first break, which will also include our first quiz and your first chance to win prizes. After the break, Stellar Development Foundation CEO and Executive Director Denelle Dixon is going to officially welcome you to Meridian and share what's in store for the rest of the week. So please stick around. All right, Meridian, it's quiz time. So during breaks throughout the conference, Lisa and I are going to give you a chance to show off your stellar knowledge. The first 2 people to answer each question correctly will win some sweet, sweet prizes. So think fast. We're going to announce the winners at the end of each day. So are you ready? All right. First question, what was Stellar Core's original name? What was Stellar Core's original name? I'll be back in a couple of minutes to share the correct answer and to introduce the next session. Welcome to Virtual Meridian with Denelle Dixon. Welcome back to Meridian 2020. So before we get into our next session, let's get the answer to our quiz question. What was Stellar Core's original name? Stellar Core was originally called Hayashi. It was named after the astrophysicist Chushiro Hayashi, whose research formed the basis of the modern understanding of early stellar evolution. Stellar Core, by the way, is the software stellar network nodes run to keep a common ledger and to validate and add transactions to it. It is quite literally the core of Stellar. All right. Back to our program. Next up, we're going to hear from SDF's CEO and Executive Director, Denelle Dixon. Denelle is SDF's fearless leader, and I personally feel incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to work with her. She was previously COO of Mozilla, and throughout her career, she's been a vocal advocate for net neutrality, encryption, the disclosure of vulnerabilities by governments, and greater user choice and control. Without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Denelle Dixon to Meridian.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome to Meridian 2020. We are honored to have you as our guests. And while we're excited to be with you virtually, we hope that next year we can get back together in person. So 2020 will be a year that will be written about for years and years to come. It showed us firsthand that despite all the borders that exist in dark ink on maps, they are not impenetrable walls or insurmountable barriers. We are connected within, among, between, and beyond those highlighted borders on those world maps. We are connected by human relationships, connected by policy impacts, and connected by the need to think about the impacts our local acts have on our global relationships. Our work at SDF is about enhancing those connections. That's why we've invited you here to join us this week, to grow and deepen the connections to the use of technology. But admittedly, as I sit in Northern California in the United States, my connection to the needs of citizens in Kenya and Brazil and the Philippines feels weak. Our lives are different. Our access to technology and to the financial system is different. Our experiences of our daily challenges are different. And in order to really understand the differences, we need to engage and connect across the globe to ensure that the technology we support is solving the problems others are facing. And we have to push ourselves to think outside of our own bubble. We have to remember that while our physical circumstances may be different, the need to work, to support a family, the need to have things of value, to pay, to have a safe place to sleep, food to eat, and tools to work are the same. Those needs transcend almost all borders, and technology can help. It's how we can take connection from just a feeling to something concrete by working together across borders to solve the real problems we face. And that's the beauty of Stellar. It gives us that connective tissue, that network to be a universal solution, and yet simultaneously relies on the experts within a border to help identify the needs and apply the solution in the way that's best for their community. Stellar is the energy that powers the projects to light up. Companies all over the world are lighting up on Stellar today. And I can't think of a better way to start this conference than to show all of you in the audience how Stellar connections are solving real problems than by sharing some of the company stories. So let's start by focusing on Africa and some of the lights there. The cost of sending money in sub-Saharan Africa is the highest globally, and yet many Africans that live away from home still send money back to their families using regular money transfer operators. The process is time-consuming, cumbersome, and expensive. Uhuru Wallet seeks to solve these challenges and is focused on doing so for migrant workers, as those workers are often excluded from the financial services offered by banks. Using Uhuru Wallet, users can load funds into a digital wallet balance, send money to person or person to merchant, pay utility bills, and purchase mobile airtime. Uhuru Wallet is developed on Stellar with its home market in South Africa and a growing base of customers across some of the biggest African markets like Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya. And then moving across Africa to another bright light, Leaf Global. Leaf Global offers a wallet built for refugees to support their journey. It is currently available in Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya, and seeks to provide affordable financial services to people who have to cross the borders of multiple countries to get to safety. Carrying cash is dangerous for those refugees, with threats of theft and violence. The wallet allows users to hold their money in digital assets as the safer alternative. Leaf Global has already processed thousands of transactions, even though they only recently launched. And it's another example of a company crafting solutions for those that have been left behind by the traditional banking system. And in Nigeria, Cowrie, built on Stellar to help solve the needs of its corporate customers, that they have connected with other businesses on Stellar in Europe, the US, and Latin America. Its primary goal is to enable Nigerians to meet the high demand for global currencies, particularly in trade, and transact in the global marketplace efficiently and cost-effectively. In underserved markets like Nigeria, where the local currency is not globally traded, cross-border payments and foreign exchanges are exceptionally slow and expensive due to high operating costs, technical inefficiencies of legacy systems, and reliance on multiple intermediaries. Cowrie's use of Stellar and those of the other products offered by others building on Stellar helps Nigerians to make those global connections for their businesses in a more cost-effective and efficient way. And how about ClickPesa in Tanzania? It offers a B2B payments platform that is focused on supporting small businesses. And small businesses are crucial as they foster growth in local economies. There is a lot of inter-African trade between Rwanda, Tanzania, and Kenya, and ClickPesa is enabling this trade by allowing businesses to pay and issue invoices across borders, making important connections. ClickPesa uses a Tanzanian shilling token on Stellar to complete these global B2B transactions and will also issue more stable coins as its business broadens. They are fully interoperable with deposits and withdrawals and hope to enable other applications and wallets to facilitate payments across Eastern Africa. Each of these businesses are lighting up Africa like a bright constellation. And in North America, we have the US-Mexico border, which is the most frequently crossed border in the world. Each day, hundreds of thousands of Mexican workers travel into the US to work and then travel back home. Most need to exchange US dollars earned in cash in the US for Mexican pesos before crossing the border. This creates a large demand for US dollars and Mexican pesos to hold as inventory that is costly and pose heightened storage and transport risks, presenting physical security challenges to both money services businesses and the workers alike. So in walks Finclusive, a US company, and it's growing global connections by working to reduce the need for cash, US dollars and Mexican pesos, for individuals and companies operating at the US-Mexico border. Finclusive is both a US anchor and offers compliance as a service, so it's easy for a Mexican anchor to receive USD to peso. Finclusive's streamlined approach to compliance prioritizes financial inclusion by addressing actual rather than perceived risk. So your status as a migrant worker will not be the basis for excluding you from the financial system, as it often is for traditional banks focused on de-risking. This project aims to reduce the use of cash currency at the border and make it safer for Mexican workers to carry and send earnings back to Mexico. And Finclusive works with Saldo, an anchor that also has a mobile wallet built for migrant workers, mainly Mexican migrant workers based in the United States, sending money back home. Today, they offer migrant workers bill pay back in Mexico to help pay bills and utilities for family members. Saldo built on Stellar because payments are at the center of the feature set, and it was an ideal platform for the problem that Saldo is focused on solving. And the lights a little further south in Latin America are Vibrant, which is a dollar savings app built on Stellar for Argentinians that allows users to access dollar-backed tokens on their mobile phones instead of pursuing in-person gray market interactions to obtain US dollars. It allows users to avoid the monthly caps enforced in the traditional banking system, and the digital dollars that are held by the user in the application are stored in a US bank account backed one-to-one by US dollars. Vibrant works with companies that issue digital assets like Settle in Argentina or Anchor USD in the US in order to make this seamless for the user. It's simple, solves a user problem, and does so elegantly. And then in Argentina, Settle is a Stellar-based business that holds the ARST. Settle is a payment infrastructure for cross-border settlement. It builds borderless tech and infrastructure that bridges the gap between traditional and digital finance. Today, their network provides digital asset settlement across LATAM and uses Argentina, and Mexico stablecoins. Settle was created to find ways to leverage the potential of blockchain technology by focus on being a bridge between the fiat and crypto world. Settle seeks to go beyond the crypto industry to provide users, real people in communities around the world, with financial services that they wouldn't normally be able to have, solving local problems using global connections. And then sometimes solutions are borderless, like D-Stock, a company that makes investing accessible and affordable for people in emerging markets through a borderless digital interface for security tokens by leveraging Stellar's built-in compliance features. Through the D-Stock interface, users have easier access to blue-chip shares such as Tesla or Amazon, as well as the bonds, indices, and commodities using fiat or cryptocurrencies. The team launched their mobile app product this past year, and it's been downloaded thousands and thousands of times already. This is the power of blockchain and the power of Stellar, bringing more opportunities to those who need and want them. Each of these businesses that I've just shared, and there are so many more that I didn't have time to showcase, demonstrate how the Stellar world is lighting up, how we're coming together within and beyond borders to solve the challenges we face, especially the challenge that is core to our mission at the Stellar Development Foundation: equitable access to the global financial system. Stellar provides the connection so that regional systems can be interconnected and interoperable. The individual companies that trust Stellar are solving real-world problems differently, based on where they sit and the needs there. With Stellar and the businesses built on it, where you are in the world doesn't have to dictate your level of access to finance. Each of these dots on the Stellar map create their own light, and there are more dots out there to light up and more connections to be made. And that's what we're here to do at Meridian. For all these powerful stories to light the path for others to follow, for our ecosystem to shine through, and to develop even more global connections with one another, to take our ideas to actions, to find and implement solutions for our challenges. Meridian is our time to highlight the progress that this network has made, showcase the exciting businesses building on Stellar, celebrate the use cases, and inspire future ones, and recognize the solutions that are changing people's lives today. Blockchain is real. It is solving real world problems. Stellar is alive, lit up and looks bright today, with the future looking even brighter. Meridian celebrates all of those who trust this network for their users, businesses and consumers alike, who are all working to solve real world challenges with global connections. I am so honored you are here to celebrate with us. Thank you. And now I'm going to invite Lisa Nestor back up on stage to continue the show.
Denelle, thank you so much for that warm Meridian welcome. We're really looking forward to spending this week talking about how we solve real-world problems, making global connections. So as a reminder, we'd love to get your feedback throughout these sessions, which you can do by using the feedback bar on the top right corner of your screen. So from here, we're going to go into our breakout tracks. I'll be staying here running the business track, where coming up next, we will have a fireside chat with SDF board member and also a partner at Founders Fund, Keith Rabois. You're definitely going to want to check this out. And on the technical track, you'll meet Justin, who will be running our first panel talking about how we create decentralization on Stellar. Konstantin from Blockdaemon and Torsten from Satoshi Pay will be leading you in that session. All right, thank you. Oh, but excuse me, but first we have a special treat for you. I can't believe I almost skipped this. During this break, you won't want to miss. I'm going to hand it over to SDF's Chief Marketing Officer, Jordan Edelstein, to tell you more.
Thanks, Lisa. Hey, everybody. As you just heard from Denelle, there are some really compelling businesses and use cases that we see on Stellar. And we want to feature those in our marketing as we work to bring more companies and developers onto the network. Cowrie Integrated Systems and Tempo France are two companies in our ecosystem that leverage the network in a way that we love to see. And so we're thrilled to feature them in this brand new case study video, which lives on a dedicated landing page that we've just launched on stellar.org. We'll be featuring this case study as well as additional ones in all of our marketing as we head into 2021. Take a look.
Stellar was created for currencies and payment, this technology. They understand exactly what market needs.
Lagos is a very vibrant, aquatic city. It's the financial center of Nigeria. Cowrie Integrated Systems is a fintech company that uses blockchain technology to enable cross-border payments.
I like Paris. It's really a very beautiful city. Tempo France, it's a payment institution to provide money transfer business for individuals and businesses.
One of the fundamental reasons why it's difficult to make cross-border payments from Nigeria is due to the fact that the Nigerian currency Naira is not globally traded. Legacy cross-border payments have not kept up with modern technology. Whenever customers have to make payments, they normally have to go through many intermediaries, which leads to a loss of value and makes their payments more expensive. When we joined the Anchor program, we came across Tempo. Tempo is a Stellar anchor, and that means they issue a token that represents euro currency. Cowrie, we issue a token that represents the Nigerian currency. And in our partnership with Tempo, we transact over the Stellar network where we trade these tokens.
Immediately, euro becomes Eurot, Eurot becomes Nigerian NGNT, and then NGNT becomes Nigerian Naira.
What Stellar can give you is liquidity for your currency, and also payments are regulated correctly by all the jurisdictions served by Stellar.
Clients can check any transaction from the beginning to the end.
We started out by serving mostly retail users, people who would purchase cryptocurrency. But ever since we opened up the Nigerian-European corridor, we're able to acquire business clients, and we've seen a lot of growth ever since then.
Transaction time, which means speed, it takes less than 10 seconds, and we increased our business 5 times during 1 year.
We've seen 5 times growth in daily payments over the last year. Today, we send 500,000 euro per week from Nigeria to Europe.
We are not going to stop only with Nigerian market. We are going to grow and extend our business in many countries and worldwide.
We're really looking forward to having global coverage for our cross-border payments business.
Hi there, Meridian. I hope you enjoyed that awesome video on Tempo and Cowrie and the Nigeria to Europe corridor that they've launched. I've been working with both of these companies for quite some time, and I'm so excited to see how they continue to build amazing products and services on Stellar. Well, up next, we have a treat for you. We're going to hear from one of the smartest guys in startups, Keith Rabois. Keith has established...
I'm Robert Hackett. I'm a senior writer.
Biggest brands in tech, including PayPal, LinkedIn, and Square. And he's going to be sharing his experiences with us on disrupting industries and building brands, and also what he sees as the future for Stellar. Robert Hackett from Fortune, who writes about all things crypto, will be moderating this discussion. I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, Meridian. I'm Robert Hackett. I'm a senior writer at Fortune, and I am here with Keith Rabois, who has had a hand in some of the biggest companies in Silicon Valley over his many years in the industry. Keith, thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure to be with you and be with everybody.
So let's kick things off. I want to ask you something about kind of the way that you have framed yourself just through your entire career as being both conservative and yet also contrarian. I'm wondering how you square those things. They seem like they could be oxymoronic in a way.
There is some, I admit there's some oxymoronic nature to being a conservative and contrarian, because by definition, a conservative takes advantage of and believes in principles from the past and wants to apply them into the future. And so to some extent, being contrarian is reinventing things and thinking first principles, what doesn't work, and trying to innovate, really. That said, in the modern Silicon Valley model culture, being conservative and contrarian is probably a Venn diagram overlap there of the two concepts, because most people here are not conservative and most people are not that contrarian. So in any event, there's probably, you're right, there's an inherent intellectual sort of contradiction there, but it also is apt for where I feel like I am today in the last 10 years in Silicon Valley, let's say.
So you've been involved in some of the biggest companies, like I said, from PayPal to LinkedIn to Yelp, Google, Square, the list goes on and on. I'm wondering what you've learned in your experiences about how to bring a company from sort of its earliest, smallest stages up to, real success.
Well, I mean, I wasn't really involved in Google. I think I worked there 2 weeks after I got acquired and quit. Putting that aside, the most important thing is the people. Really, at the end of the day, the people drive everything. So in Silicon Valley, you can easily get distracted with technology, products, fancy intellectual analysis of all these markets. At the end of the day, it's the team you build, it's the company you build. And so what I've learned is the only thing to worry about is, do I have the right people in the right opportunities, in the right seats, so to speak. Basically, if you think of baseball metaphor, the right people playing in the right positions. And if that is true, then everything's going to work out. And if that's not true, it's very difficult to make things succeed. So I focus from the day I get involved in a company, from the day I meet a founder, to do they have the right team for the problems they're seeking to solve.
What do you look for in a founder, in a person? What are the sorts of attributes that define a successful entrepreneur or just, business person, tech?
I think there are two elements. One is very specific to the particular opportunity. So if one wanted to build space apps, there are different skill sets to building photo sharing apps to compete with, let's say, Instagram. But there are some general traits that apply to entrepreneurial endeavors. I think tenacity is first. You can define it as relentlessly resourcefulness, which Paul Graham wrote a great blog post about. So a little bit better, maybe more accurate than tenacity, but they're roughly similar. There's also a book by Duckworth, who's on grit, which is also a similar concept. So something in that category is pretty important, fundamental. Second thing, I actually believe in IQ. At the end of the day, you're trying to solve problems that other people haven't been able to solve and see things that other people haven't been able to see. And that typically is a function of IQ. And then third is the ability to assess people. As I mentioned, basically you're building a team. And team building requires you to be able to accurately diagnose the skills and the opportunity and the growth curve, really, of the potential people you meet as you interview them, as you recruit them, and as you have them in your organization, and move them around into opportunities where they can really thrive and succeed. Those three things together are usually magical.
So, I mean, the pandemic has had a big effect on everything in the world at this point. How has it affected your job, your ability to do your job, and maybe even what you're looking at, the theses you might have, how you're evaluating entrepreneurs?
Yeah, COVID's been an interesting, in quotes, opportunity. So I'd say on the negative side, at Founders Fund, we're founders-driven investors. At the end of the day, the most important thing for us is the caliber and quality of founders. And I think in the Zoom investing world, or remote investing world, it's extremely difficult to gauge the quality of people that you don't already know. It's not that difficult to meet with and gauge people by Zoom that you already have some pre-existing relationship with, experience with, but it's extraordinarily difficult to, from a cold start, evaluate somebody, not just where they are today, but what their potential growth curve is. It's hard to do this in person, period, anyway. It's extraordinarily difficult to do this remotely. And so I've found that I feel like I'm at a comparative disadvantage vis-a-vis the few people I compete with. And as a firm, we may be at a comparative disadvantage in evaluating early stage opportunities as we've had to and relegated to Zoom-based investing. So I think that's just a negative, at least for me, for us. Now, we'll see how long this persists. Is this permanent or temporary? And nobody really knows the answer to that. It's mostly driven by healthcare. Second, though, has it shifted some of the opportunities? Yes. I think there's less inertia. One of the biggest challenges to starting a new company, particularly on the consumer side, but somewhat also true on enterprise, is inverting inertia. So people have 24 hours in a day, and they've already arranged those 24 hours around sleep, family, hobbies, jobs. And so anytime you launch something new, you have to reorient people's time. And that basically means replacing something. People forget about this all the time, that anytime you want me to adopt a new product, I have to get rid of something and drop something. And that behavior is pretty ingrained in my life usually. And what COVID has done is force people with a big stick. Basically, you're going to reinvent your time whether you like it or not. You're no longer going to movie theaters. You're no longer going to concerts. You're no longer going to restaurants. This, and this is just not happening. And so, well, I've got all this extra time and I'm kind of bored. So I might want to do something else at that time. So in some ways, it's easier to get traction with a new product right now in the last 6 to 9 months because people have had to rethink their prioritization and time allocation. And typically they don't really want to rethink it. So I think that's been a healthy dynamic, and it's been easier to fund maybe innovative things on the consumer side.
Have you seen this across your portfolio? Have you seen an uptick in usage across all of your various investments?
Yes, I mean, some are obviously propelled by COVID. Think DoorDash. People couldn't go to restaurants, so of course they want food delivered. I mean, clear substitution. Not in my portfolio, although I wish it was. This is like Peloton. Obviously, there is some preference to going to real world classes, real world gyms, at least for a large fraction of America. Not really possible. So people have substituted massively to things like Peloton. We do have in our portfolio a company called Tempo, which is basically strength training at home with a class live instructor, kind of like Peloton strength training, and it's done phenomenally well. Not unexpected, propelled by the COVID world. But then there's another category of companies that aren't directly propelled by COVID, but are still thriving. So across the portfolio I work with, let's say 80% of the companies are better off than they were before COVID. And not because the market has made things better, it's because I think it's just better for technology-oriented companies to compete against inertia, to compete against incumbents in a remote world. And so therefore, this sounds kind of crazy and anomalous that 80% of our companies would be doing better, but it's factually true. I also think it was just also forced some discipline. Sometimes in a high growth company, people are lazy about making tough decisions because everything's kind of up and to the right. And so you sort of postpone making hard decisions or painful decisions. And when COVID sort of hit, everybody had to make very dramatic, very decisive decisions, bold. And it turns out that was a very healthy thing for the organization as a whole, teaching people that muscle, that ability, that confidence of, I can make trade-off decisions, I can prioritize things, ruthlessly. The companies as a whole just operate better, and that will lead to a better outcome for a huge swath of the companies.
So I've got to ask about this what's going on kind of like broadly in business right now. There's this renaissance going on with respect to fintech. There's quite a boom. PayPal is absolutely crushing it, and so is Square. Having been involved with both of those companies early on, I'm wondering how you're viewing this new sort of wave of fintech that's arriving. What's behind it?
Well, I mean, obviously the market caps of PayPal and Square are propelling a lot of investment. Just like looking at a $200+ billion PayPal, a $70-80 billion Square, a $40-50 billion audience, Shopify, which is moderately fintech at $100 billion+. Obviously, investors and entrepreneurs react to positive examples that they see, and they want to emulate that. Traditionally, we started back in PayPal in 2000. Everybody hated fintech. I don't even know if that's the right term, but they hated financial services meets technology. It was perceived to be a boring, sleepy, low margin, difficult business. It's still a difficult business. I think all the other things may be false. I actually think Square helped propel this, the sex appeal of the company. I think financial services was considered boring, dry. A lot of entrepreneurs substitute to things that are fascinating, interesting, kind of a shiny object. And Square sort of made payments cool with design and a bunch of design-driven principles, and just had a very, very different approach. And I think when Square started working, it was perceived to be working among entrepreneurs and investors. It opened up people's eyes to there was a lot more there. I remember when I joined Square and decided to join Square in the summer of 2010. It was really controversial among my friends when I sort of made a commitment. There's a lot of my friends have this stereotype, a caricature image of financial services. Like, why are you doing that? Why are you going back to that? It wasn't PayPal really bad and difficult and boring and all this stuff. And it almost got to me, truthfully. It's like literally like half my friends. Now I think if you join a company like that, maybe 1%, 85% of your friends would have those views, but it'd be very popular, maybe too popular. You can argue that if anything, it's come to consensus to invest in fintech, although we're certainly doing more of it.
I've also noticed that some of these companies have recently made some signals that are kind of bullish when it comes to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. PayPal having added the ability, saying they're going to add it for Venmo next year. Square actually investing in it $50 million. And the sort of broader macroeconomic world. I mean, Bitcoin has been taking off. It's gone up above 10,000 today when we're filming this, which is not when it's going to be. It's going to be up before or after we've actually done this. But today it was at 15,000, which was quite a signal. I'm wondering what you think about cryptocurrency, whether your opinions about it have changed, whether you're more bullish or bearish. How does a contrarian kind of play cryptocurrency at this point in the game?
It is a very good question. I mean, I'd say from a founder's fund perspective, we're pretty bullish on Bitcoin. We made the decision years ago to buy Bitcoin directly, and continue to somewhat do that. We are looking at alternative crypto investments, but there is some degree of consensus, sort of emerging around crypto now again. And so it's hard to be contrarian as the price keeps going up. There may be things orthogonal to Bitcoin's price that might be interesting in crypto again. And then, we certainly look to fund those. But it was easier to be sort of contrarian when crypto was crashing. Now there's, I think it's somewhat a function of the macro environment. There's perceived, inflation forthcoming. There's certainly the governments of the world printing money. There's some potential hedge against volatility and government intrusion in people's lives. And so there's a lot of macro developments that are probably propelling some investment in crypto at the moment.
Are you planning to make more bets in that world, or are you sort of sitting back and just waiting and seeing what's going to happen?
I suspect we'll make more bets, but I mean, at the end of the day, as an investor, you're typically reactive to what entrepreneurs want to do. So 95% of the time, we're really funding things that entrepreneurs have decided they want to pursue, and we're giving them fuel, rocket fuel, oxygen, to propel them to chase their vision. Very rarely, not never, but very rarely are we actually top-down, deriving a vision of what should happen and then, kind of creating it. We do that. We did that with Anduril, which has done very well at Founders Fund. I did that previously with Open Door, and we're funding a new internal project right now in a very high-tech, deep tech space. So we can do that, but it's once every 3 to 5 years. The meat and potatoes of what we do is other people on the planet who have talent and ambition come to us and ask for support. So really, it's a function of what are the top-tier entrepreneurs and proto-entrepreneurs want to do with their time, and are they finding interesting, fascinating things to do with crypto?
Have you detected any themes or patterns as to what the most interesting and technically talented people are interested in right now at this moment?
Not necessarily patterns, because I think it's pretty fragmented. I think we see innovation and interest in healthcare, not surprisingly, given the headlines you read about. If anything, COVID has certainly exposed both the opportunities and weaknesses in our current healthcare system. So entrepreneurs are definitely interested in that. Definitely see a development over the last 2 or 3 years that's novel, interest in climate change and creating innovation that would help address climate change, not government regulation, but like bottoms up innovation, like technology, software, et cetera. So that's become pretty common to see. You do absolutely see a lot of financial services, innovation and versions of the same, sort of taking advantage of what lessons they can glean from successful companies, applying them in new verticals or new opportunities. Autonomous driving, there's still interest there, figuring that out. I mean, obviously 30, 40,000 Americans die somewhat unnecessarily every year in auto accidents. There's a lot of other benefits to autonomous driving, but safety and life preservation is one of them. So we see that, but we don't really, there's probably a fair amount of innovation in mental health, different versions of mental health, not just the talk to a psychiatrist, psychologist kind of version of mental health, but, and certainly 2020 has been challenging for many people's mental health, from almost every possible dimension. So there's more interest there. I'd say those are probably the biggest obvious deltas from maybe 5 years ago.
You've been in San Francisco for a while now. Are you going to stay there? There's been a lot of talk of flight out of cities with the pandemic. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I've lived in the Bay Area since 2000. I moved out here to join PayPal. And I've lived in San Francisco since 2003. So right after we sold the company to eBay, I moved up to the city. So 17 years. I'm planning to leave San Francisco. I think San Francisco is just so massively improperly run and managed that it's made it impossible to stay here. I've surveyed most of the CEOs I work with just to start a Zoom call on a one-on-one. I basically asked them what fraction of their close colleagues and friends are in San Francisco. And in the last 2 conversations I've had, one CEO told me that he's married, so 4 of their 7 as a couple's closest friends have already left the Bay Area. And then one other CEO told me of his 20 closest friends, only 6 are still in the Bay Area. So I think that's actually what's going on under the radar. COVID sort of masked this because it's not quite as obvious where people are moving to, and if they've actually moved because everybody's working remotely. But yeah, we're moving imminently outside California.
Would you have done this if it weren't for the pandemic?
Probably not. I think that the pandemic had an interesting couple of facts. One is, I think there was a perceived handicap or handcuffs on moving outside California that may in fact be more psychological than real. And I think what COVID and quarantine and work remote has done is expose that they may be more psychological handicaps and constraints than metaphysical ones. And I don't know if any of us would have had enough sort of conviction around that prior to working remotely at scale and just watching. Secondly, because of the rules associated with lockdowns, especially in San Francisco and California, you're effectively not getting any of the benefits of an urban environment, and you're getting all the downsides of not being in suburbia. So, the reasons why people gravitate towards a city is typically like social density, bars, restaurants, think of all the vibrancy that you get in a city. And COVID and quarantine rules have basically eliminated that. So all you get are the downsides, which is less space, less outdoor space, all the negatives, but none of the upsides. So I think a lot of people have shifted. If I'm going to live in a suburban lifestyle because I have to for healthcare reasons, I might as well get the benefits of suburbia, more space, outdoor space, et cetera. And so I think that's what's led to a lot of the substitution away from San Francisco.
Now, given your work with Open Door, real estate startup, are you seeing these trends broadly? Is this something that is this actually a trend that's happening, or is it something that people are just kind of hand-wringing about the death of cities?
Well, people are buying and selling houses at real scale right now. People are shifting their preferences of where they want to live, which is leading to the velocity of sale. So you can see this in Zillow data, Redfin data, Open Door data, all this is public. That's why Zillow is trading at a significant premium over the last year. Redfin's 3x its market cap in the last 18 months. It's all propelled by people who locate. As people change their preferences, obviously they dispose of their current place and buy new ones. And so Open Door is in the business of buying and selling houses, so obviously that helps Open Door. But we absolutely see the preference changes. You see the rents. Rents are actually faster feedback loops than real estate for a variety of reasons. And the Bay Area, in San Francisco particularly, rents are in free fall. They're down like 30% year to year. We're probably going to hit the lowest, sort of rental, average rental price in San Francisco in over a decade in October. And this is still masked by things like concessions that don't make it quite as transparent. You're seeing this in New York City too. By the way, rents in New York are also in free fall. So there's clear substitution going on in people's preferences. How durable it is another question. Do people move somewhere in 2021, 2022, and then realize their trade-offs and want to move back to dense urban city? Maybe, but that'll take some time to sort out. But it's very clear right now that people are shifting their preferences pretty massively.
Where are you headed?
I'm going to Florida.
And what went behind that decision?
Well, Florida is a very well-run state. Miami is an incredibly beautiful city, cosmopolitan, has an interesting mix of New Yorkers, Latin Americans, and Europeans. It's a very pro-business state and city. Like, for example, there's no state income tax, and they seem to run their city pretty well. There's very limited traffic, which is nice. Also living in the Bay Area for 20 years. It's just like all the things you wish you had in the Bay Area. I'm a fan of warm weather and water, so it feels like I'm going on vacation.
That sounds nice. Let's talk a little bit about this turn that's happened in politics against big tech. There was the House antitrust report put out. Now the DOJ is suing Google. Recently, they said they're going to try to block the Plaid acquisition by Visa. And of course, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook are in everybody's sights as well. Should these companies be broken up?
Well, most of them, no. I think, most of these companies are not by any definition a monopoly. I think you can make a certain case that Google's got a monopoly power in a relevant market. Pretty easy to see Visa as a duopoly, notwithstanding the innovation all around financial services. I think from a market share perspective, it wouldn't be that controversial to show that Visa's got significant market power. And so I think the Google and to some extent the DOJ case against Visa, which was announced this morning, make a lot of sense. I think everything else is, you're basically torturing antitrust principles to try to achieve other objectives, and that doesn't make any sense to me. I think, for example, there's a lot of people on the left that really don't like big technology companies, whether for good or bad reasons. I think some of it's purely like sort of fake news from 2016. And, with Biden winning, most likely, I think all of a sudden the left's critiques of big tech are going to be a lot less because there won't be an election result to blame. And then the conservative.
By the way, filming this before the election result, just to clarify.
Yeah, so I suspect that Biden ultimately is president of the United States, barring a couple subtle changes, which could happen, but like more likely than not by a lot. But on the right, you're also seeing a lot of animosity towards technology companies because they are censoring conservative opinions in a disproportionate way. And at some point, the Republicans and the conservatives are not going to tolerate large companies being advocates for the Democratic Party of the United States. Like, that's just a non-starter. Any Fortune 500 company knows that. Like, if you look at how financial services companies in New York have acted, they know that they cannot be a partisan arm. And technology companies are going to learn the hard way that if Twitter particularly is acting as an ally of the Democratic Party, eventually Republicans are going to figure out what to do about that. And I don't think antitrust law is the right solution. There's plenty of other ways to stop Twitter from suppressing conservative opinions.
You mentioned this, that there is maybe some bias coming out of the way that these companies are doing content. And conspiracy theories?
They may argue that, but when you allow misinformation from the left and you suppress it from the right, or you allow misinformation from China, but don't allow it from President Trump, or you allow it from Iran, but not from some Republican press secretary, you obviously have bias. There's just no way you can justify the CCP proselytizing propaganda and suppressing the New York Post.
What are you being a contrarian and also about this sort of problem of big tech maybe censoring information? I wonder what your information diet is like.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, I'm kind of old school, and maybe it's a function of my age, but I actually like to read books. I read long-form books, and that's how I find interesting new ideas, new data, because most people aren't actually reading these books. And so if you read the same information diet as other people, you're going to have effectively the same views usually, or at least a distribution curve around them. So I like to go back to original source materials, read books, and find new things to think about. And the good news is books don't get censored nearly as much, which is ironic because to me, the solution of content moderation disinformation is actually pretty trivially easy. We've had laws around defamation and libel and porn, obscenity for centuries. Works fine. We have publishing industries all across the world that work fine. And so I don't see why Twitter, Facebook, anybody else, Google, should be innovating. If a piece of content can be published in a book, it should absolutely be publishable on Twitter.
What are you reading now? Anything good? Anything you'd recommend?
Yeah, I unfortunately have books all around the house. So it depends on your interest. In the business world, I'm reading, a combination. One book I'd recommend for people who haven't read it, I'm a big fan of, it's on the bookshelf right behind me. It's called Moonshots. It's about how to optimize a current business while propelling innovation at the same time throughout the history of technology. Highly, highly recommend that one. From a completely orthogonal perspective, I'm reading a book about breathing, which may sound boring and dumb, but it's about how you breathe, whether you breathe through your nose or mouth, affects everything about your life, like your immunity, to your happiness. It's incredibly provocative, extremely well researched, and actually quite well written. It's not my standard cup of tea. I don't usually read books like this, but it's fascinating. I already catch myself at night, try to force myself to breathe more through my nose. It's been that effective in changing my behavior. And then from a policy perspective, there's actually a great new book written about COVID that I highly recommend. Something Paradox, I'm forgetting the title, but just published. It's really good. And it's very timely, obviously. Informative, timely, provocative, rigorously researched. And then from a politics perspective, I'm usually reading a biography or so, like something. I have a couple right now that I'm halfway through. There's a new Churchill one I really like, which is actually really difficult to do, write something new and novel about Churchill. There's a new one brand new one about James Baker, who just starting, and I think will be fascinating. And then there's one about the rise of Ronald Reagan in 1976, actually, which I find truly fascinating. The world's history could have been very, very different with a couple of little delta changes. It's amazing, as you grow up, and actually 2020 is proving this as well, little small changes that were not preordained, how they affect human history, pretty magical. And so the rise of Reagan in 76 is pretty fascinating because it did propel probably 30, 40 years of intellectual discourse changes in the US and the UK particularly, but then it affected globally through the Soviet Union's collapse, et cetera. So I find that one pretty good as well. It's based on a name, but Richard Perlman's the author.
Excellent. You've got a wide-ranging variety of interests there. I'm quite interested in that Breathe book. I'm going to be taking some deep breaths.
On Twitter. So one thing, if people want my reading list, what I've decided to do is, if you go to my media tab, I basically screenshot books I'm reading. And so if you just go to the media tab, they don't, unfortunately, Twitter doesn't have a feature where you can relabel it, like I just call it books. But if you go to my media tab, like 90% of what you're going to see will be books.
That's fantastic. We'll be checking out your library. And very quickly, just before we sign off, I'd love to ask you, what is the most overhyped thing right now? What's everybody into that you think is just not gonna pan out?
To some extent, I've had this view for 5-10 years. I still am not the biggest fan of VR. And I think reality is, if in a COVID world where everybody's locked in their house, you can't really get VR to be mainstream. I think that's sort of proof right there. In the real world, when we're back to normal at some point, hopefully, there's so many distractions and so many benefits of real world experiences versus VR. But with 6 months of people literally being locked in home and you can't propel VR, I think that's a pretty big indictment.
I think with the rise of Zoom, that is a truly contrarian take, that VR isn't going to be as big as people think it might be. But Keith, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for telling us all of your wide-ranging opinions on so many subjects. And have a good move to Miami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meridian, for joining us.
Wow, fascinating insights from Keith and Robert. I hope you all are as excited and jazzed up about making your way in the emerging tech space as I am. Either way, we would love to get your feedback, so feel free to share that. You can do that with the feedback bar in the top right hand of your screen. Also, I want to make a quick PSA about networking at Meridian. This is a super important part of these conferences and events, so just because we're digital, you don't want to be left behind. Check it out. You can network with other guests by seeing the list of attendees and poking someone and asking them if they will go into a virtual chat with you, or you can start hopefully a very fruitful discussion. So make sure that you check that out and keep up your networking even on this digital event. So up next, you're in luck because I'm going to be your stellar professor teaching you about all the things you need to know to get your business started on Stellar. But first, we have a bit of a longer break, and we'll also have our second quiz. So to kick things off, I am very pleased to share that our house band, The Roots, will be kicking off our next break. They are one of the most respected and well-known US bands, 12-time Grammy Award winners. It is my pleasure to hand it off to The Roots to kick things off.
Stellar Meridian. Hope everybody's good. I hope y'all having a wonderful conference thus far. We are the legendary hard